Welcome, everybody. We're here. Filler Instinct coming at you. I got the Mr. Doctor, as I like to call him, with me. Mr. Bosky, how you doing today?
Mr. DrBossKey. Yeah. Doing well. Glad we're here.
Glad to be here. For those of you who don't know, and you should be here because of this, I have just completed this man's 1cc challenge for his excellent shoot 'em up game, Interstellar Sentinel. As I said, he showed up here at the front door in a hologram. In addition to being a great content creator, a great game maker, he's also an intergalactic traveler. And he presented with me the 1cc challenge. Mr. Doctor, would you like to tell the people about the 1cc?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So back in the day when I had more hair and the world was younger, we had these things called arcades. They were magical places, primarily extra popular here in the States. And back then, you had basically you put a quarter in the machine, and it became more over time. And it was a rite of passage to be able to beat the entire game on a quarter, whether it was a brawler, whether it was an arcade game, whether it was Pac-Man getting a screen like clear or a screen destroy, right? Or if it was a shmup. And the thing is that shmups are incredibly hard because they're also trying they're running it as a business. So if you let someone play for hours and hours on a single quarter, you wouldn't have a good return. But they had to be balanced because if you felt like you couldn't do it, and because the game was cheating or it was impossible to clear or whatever the reason may be, then they became games that weren't engaging. So carrying that through, I had this whole thing happen where I was on our shmups for Reddit, and someone had posted basically an image because in the modern times, right, like arcades are pretty much dead, but the spirit of the one credit clear it lives on. So, and that lives on as in, you play through the whole game and you beat it without getting to continue screen. So on our shmups, I was hanging out and I saw that someone posted and they were really cool. They were super cheeky about it, but they basically had an image where it was like a cork board and they had about 9 or 10 shmups that they had played. So there was like a Dodon Pachi on there. There were a number of different games. So they took all the logos for the games and they created basically stickers. And then they had this board of all of these pins that they basically created that represented all the time they'd spent one credit clearing shmup. So the other thing to know is because shmups are hard, it's a rite of passage to rise to the challenge to try to beat them. Now, all shmups are different in terms of their scope and expectation for skills, but it was really, really cool. I saw this thread. People were like, "Yeah, this is super awesome," and I got inspired. And I was like, So then I went away and I have my graphics for the game, and I was like, how much would it cost me to basically make a physical pin for my game based on what this person had did? And so I basically put together a prototype, sent off to Sticker Mule, and for like $20, I was able to get essentially 10 acrylic pins with backing, and then I put the logo on there, all that good stuff too. And I was like, all right, this is pretty cool. I was like super excited by the whole thing. I, of course, one credit cleared my game many, many times at this point. And many other people have taken the gauntlet. And so what I did is I said, okay, cool. I put it out on socials and I said, for anyone that one credit clears my game on heroic difficulty, I will send you a physical pin. And that's what kind of started this journey. And then part of that, and Phil, your pins pretty much in the mail, so you get to be able to unbox this thing. Like I've got your certificate in here. There,
Can't wait.
So it put me on this own personal journey. We live in such a modern and wonderful time where you can go from an idea to like a physical thing in just a few hours, really, honestly. I mean, with some shipping. And so I then was like, oh, let me iterate on this design. So then kind of put me down on this rabbit hole where I needed to have a little box design and what's going to be filled with. And I kind of put on my Apple hat, right? Where I was like, what does it mean when you get this thing? And you'll see when you unpack yours, to just kind of go through the process of, celebrating the fact that you actually, have accomplished the one credit clear pin. So that's where it comes from. Thought I would share, and I'm super, super stoked for you. How much time did it take, by the way, do you think?
I did what? I mean, there's 10 playthroughs that I posted. I think it took me 20 or so hours. I think by the time I had finished my last playthrough and then when I completed the challenge, I think I had hit 20 hours total. So it was, as someone who was not well versed in shmups, I think I said that right. it was kind of cool to like, because I'm a big fighting game player, if you couldn't tell by my name. And it was kind of cool to like learn different techniques and how to like I've always been fascinated by these. I've dabbled with them, but I've never really like took the time like I would something like a Tekken or a Street Fighter or a Mortal Kombat to be like, okay, let's learn the frame data, let's learn the technique. So it was really cool, learning like, oh, some of these you can figure eight. Oh, like I think bullet leading I thought was, okay, I need to lead my bullets where no, bullet leading is like, no, you're basically leading the bullets to one location and then dodging at the last second so they don't hit you. So part of my journey was really like going through the game and playing it over and over and over, like kind of, like labbing as we call it. But what was really fun for me was, not only did you make a game that in my opinion is super fun to play, it was really, really nice to kind of learn like how to do these different techniques of, oh, you want to bullet lead here, you want to figure eight here, you need to pay attention to the patterns of the boss, because this is where a lot of this comes from in those modern games we have nowadays too, of learning boss patterns and whatnot. But shmups have always been around. They're really, really fun. And I'm thankful to have beefed up my knowledge a little bit when it comes to playing these things.
Yeah, so I guess today then what we're gonna do is we're gonna watch your playthrough, right? And we're just gonna talk about like the game and talk about your techniques and some of the things that you found fascinating. I'm here and available for any questions, of course. And so let's
critique my
let's have a good
gameplay
time.
as well, because I'm sure there's
absolutely.
I can't wait for that. All right, let's get it started. Just real quick before we get started, the game is Interstellar Sentinel. There will be a link below. Please purchase the game. Not only is DrBossKey a tremendous content creator, and a lot of his stuff has been on his streams before the game released, he's also a very, very good man and deserves your support. And like I said, he might even intergalactic travel to you and offer you the 1cc. Right, let's get this started.
And even if it's not your jam and you're not really into shmups or whatnot, because I know they're very intimidating. People see them and they kind of fall into two camps. One is, holy shit, there's so much stuff on screen, I will never be able to ever. And they just it's like people that are like, I hate math, right? Like it's just this thing that happens where they're like, nope. And then there's the other person that's like, that actually kind of looks interesting. Let me see if I can wade myself through this craziness, right? And bullet hell has become a subgenre of shmups, and of course, and we'll talk more about this in a second. But there's a whole. I mean, shmups are one of the first and longest and oldest games, and they a lot of modern gaming owes a lot of DNA to a lot of these games. The auto scrollers back in the day, lots of and they take the basics of survive, kill, and then the other techniques that come from that. So
before we get started, one of my favorite things is when I was going through my journey and I got to a boss that was, and we're going to talk about it too, that was very challenging for me. And I asked you, I was like, okay, how do I beat it? Don't get hit. The most simplest advice, not like, okay, because most people would be like, okay, what you need to do is do this. And you were just like, don't get hit.
If you can't survive, rule number one, if you can't survive, right? Like, then no other rules apply at that point. So,
we're going to get this started. And one more thing about his game. I know, the Mr. Doctor just said, shmups are very intimidating. I would know because I've just been playing this game quite a bit. But if I can do it, you can do it. And with that said,
that's very true.
Let's.
So the other side of that, right, is that I made this shmup to be welcoming to the genre. So it's kind of a mix of all the things that I love. And you can go ahead and start this. I mean, we can already jam. So I've played a ton of Gradius, right? And I played lots of Life Force, and I've had all these shmups that I played for literally over the course of my life. So starting back from even older days. I mean, technically the Atari 2600 had some shmups when you think about Space Invaders and things like that.
I was just about to mention Space Invaders too while we were talking.
Core DNA, Galaga, things like that, right? Yeah. So, and so I really wanted to make a game that brought back some approachability, but I also really enjoyed bullet hell. So being able to essentially spend time with bullet hell and to design in that space, it was really interesting to kind of put both of these concepts together. So very, very much R-type inspiration and having the longer shmups and the longer levels, but then to have some of that kind of bullet hell light aspects of the bosses.
I think that was the first thing I mentioned to you too when I was playing it. I was like, this is such a callback to R-type,
Mm-hmm.
And there's that.
Dude, look at you getting your dodges on here.
I know my dodges are working great.
That'd be fantastic, actually.
And I'm always my own worst critic. So I'm watching. It's like, what, you held onto that. Oh wait, I was in pacifist mode. Never mind.
Yeah, I find that, so first of all, I'm a total ass because one of the first things you run into in the game is a power up and it's pacifist mode. And no matter how much I make this thing look dangerous and intimidating, it's not super friendly. So people freak out because they can't shoot for the period of time. There's the timer and the countdown. But then it also breaks down the core aspects of a shmup, right? Like fly around, don't get hit.
Yeah.
Right. Like so, and because you can't do anything else, it also means that it kind of just reinforces that core, right? And I find that people at first start avoiding them, and eventually, because if they're really heavily stacked into the rank system, you get a free life, you get extra points, you get to basically have higher level power ups for the different weapon sets.
Yeah.
And so all of those things also mean that every time you do a pacifist mode, there's almost zero. There is risk, but the chances of you dying twice in pacifist mode are a lot less, so it helps people come back. So people usually turn the corner and then come back to, like, you know, engaging with pacifist mode.
I did that for a while too, and then the more I played through it, the more I realized, oh no, you kind of need to do the pacifist mode because having that extra life just makes all the difference. Even if you lose it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost zero risk. Yeah. It also is my little thing, like, so in shmups, one of the things that I designed for the things I hadn't really experienced in a shmup completely, right? So I went bonkers on the weapon system. And by bonkers, I mean there are 57 weapons. There are 19 weapon sets, which are your rapid shot, your power shot, and your auto shot, right? And it's a lot. It's a freaking ton to ask players to understand these different weapons. And we flip the script a little bit, and we do short range weapons, and we do different oddball weapons, and people kind of find their favorites. So I was the type of shmup player where I'm like, ooh, I want to really use the laser in Gradius. Like, this is the thing. And in Gradius, you only had like Ripple and a few other, like, you had a few other choices, but not a ton, right? And so I would find the weapons I like, and then I would stick with them. And so I challenged myself with this game that I wanted to have, as part of the core loop, the ability to have the weapons changing all the time. So it's one more index, one more option to, like, change the gameplay up, right? And in these types of games, if you have dead time, 10 seconds is an eternity. So if you have 10 seconds of nothing happening, like, you've designed a Euro shmup where you're sightseeing and a few other things. That's not necessarily bad, right? But one of the things I really love about these style of games in arcade games is their direct gameplay. It's just moment to moment. It's all about flow state. It's all about staying as present as possible and essentially orchestrating your presence in the game until you become more and more masterful over it, right?
Right. I think that's one of the things I like about having such a deep weapon system like you do in the game is, you know, people obviously have their favorites, but it's like there's different stuff that works too. And I think one thing that I really did love that you did in this game is you really kind of balanced the weapon system. Like, you know, maybe the power shot isn't as good, but the regular shot is good, or vice versa. And then there's just some, like the final one, where both of them are just fantastic.
Yeah, I tried it. It's one of the tricks in shmup design, right? Where with something like 20 different weapon sets, weapon set 20 isn't 20 times more powerful. You really can't balance that at that point. And if you have no risk, there is no reward, right? So, I mean, I could give you 1,000,000 lives, I could turn up all the damage, and then, you know, there's no challenge. There's just hold the button down, right? And I think one of the aspects of that is important is when designing, like, gameplay, you want to design. It's one of my tenets, right? Which is you want the player to feel like they're clever, right? So you set up the puzzle, or you set up the system, and then the player, because as we're all gamers, right? So we do a lot of things instinctively. A lot of us min-max, right? Like, a lot of us are looking for the right tools for the right job, you know. And once we know the rules, we're trying to exploit those rules to beat the game, to be as good as possible, even break the game, right? So, and one of the tricks you wind up doing in shmup design is, and this is the way I did with the weapons, is basically each of the weapon sets have different utilities. So they become, you know, they have bigger streams, right? Like, maybe they are spread shots, or maybe they are close range but do a lot of damage. So they also encourage different play styles. But there's also aspects to that where when you are designing a shmup, you're also designing for those things to be discovered, right? And for people, as coming from my old days, it's really important to get players to argue about what they think the best things are. And if they can't, if there's no argument, well, there's no balance. There's no game design there, right?
Right. Then it's just you've got just something where it's like, well, this is like a lot of those SNES games, even NES games, I would say would be a more apt example. Like back in the day, once you like broke the game, if you will, it's like, what's the fun? It's like, yeah, there might be a great story here, but once you don't have like what you said, like with the different weapon systems in a shmup, what's the point? I think that's just what makes like these type of games.
Damn it, I got the royal score. Fuck.
I got caught up in me saying
It won't be
"God
this
damn
run.
it, gee." I
Yeah, you
apologize,
did.
but it's like a lot of what it just adds a different dynamic, which is what I really appreciated, especially when I come from the background I come from of like having the different weapons and everybody has their favorite. I'm sure I could tell you my 5 favorite. You could tell me your 5 favorite. They'd be completely different,
Well, and the best part about being the game designer is that, like, for instance, last month, I buffed the vertical spread shot weapon set. And by buffing it, I basically added like forward and backwards missiles on top of the spread itself, changed the entire weapon set. And I think we finally got it to a good place. And I've iterated on this weapon set now like 50 times, right? And kind of nudging it and trying to boost it and trying to make it more useful, because the moment it becomes a vertical spread shot, it makes your brain go, what? Like, and
Right.
you have to then think about the game differently in that respect. And that can be good, but that's also like, it's a dichotomy of what you're trying to do, especially in the clutch. That's also one of the reasons why I wound up adding the power downer feature, so you can always downgrade your weapon sets if you find that you're in a stuck spot or you have something you want to stick with.
What was the inspiration behind that, by the way? Because I also thought that was a unique mechanic. Because in a lot of these games, once you like say like you have your favorite weapon set, and then you grab another one, and then it's like, oh no, I'm kind of screwed because I wanted that other shot. But you actually give us the option of like, oh, you don't like this? Well, great, you can go back to that. So talk a little bit about that if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, so I'm so grateful, because without players, without people playing the game and giving feedback through all the stages of development, even when the game's released, you wouldn't necessarily come to the conclusions we've come to, right? So one of the byproducts of having 57 weapons is, well, like in my mind when I designed it, it was like, cool, I know all the weapons and I'm upgrading, and you have the risk and reward for if you die, you downgrade one weapon set. And it turns out that a lot of players were starting to feel like they got trapped with a weapon set that they couldn't use as effectively against a boss. Like they'd have a short range weapon like the Phaser, and the bosses, they're very hard to get close to in a lot of cases, depending on their weapon patterns, right? So, and they were starting to tell me that they just felt like when they had an upgrade, because sometimes you get them during bosses, that it didn't feel like a true upgrade. Even if the math was right, it just wasn't their play style, and they would rather just die to then go back to the previous weapon set they had, right? And it kind of created this weird loop for them where, like anytime you're making a game and you're making it like, hey, it's better just to die here than to play the game, you've probably fucked up your game, like your gameplay curve a little bit, right? So and so I puzzled over this for a long time, and I, of course, tweaked and changed and tuned all the weapons quite a bit around it. And then I finally was like, all right, let's just give the utility. Now, the utility confuses people. There's the other side of that, and it's hard to teach, but people will eventually figure it out. And now, since I've rolled out that feature and given players the opportunity to have that play style, it's as you've already found out, like you can now use it as part of your method for like, oh, I think this weapon is super great on this boss, right?
Yeah, there's
also some nice.
Come there and be like, gosh, dang! I hope those Loki show up so I could, get a power up and get the weapon I need like right here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Those little. What's up?
No, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say those little blue guys. I gotta tell you.
The Las Olwas, these guys here, the exploders.
Yes, the exploders.
Yeah.
Little annoying. What was your? Where did you come up with those guys?
Yeah, so there's a couple things here. So one is that the Treant Demon that I have here, this is my nod to essentially I'm a huge fighting game guy too. Like I've probably got almost 10,000 hours in Tekken across the whole series, right? Back when the arcade boards were still a thing. But this guy is my nod to the Mortal Kombat 2 Living Forest. The first time I saw that stage with their groaning and the Keebler elves that jump out when you get the right, like there were all kinds of weird myths around that stuff back in the day. But this is, like that really inspired me. So I wanted to have like a big presence, and of course, Shmuppify and all that. But like a lot of the game is things that I've found personally that I've loved over time, and with the Lost Soulless, those blue exploder guys, like. So basically, I'm a huge Castlevania fan, right? Like Castlevania Symphony. If I had my top 10 list of games that I could take with me to the desert island, like Castlevania Symphony of the Night would be on that list for sure, right? And there's just something I freaking love about killing fantasy creatures, right? Like if you're a Belmont, you're whipping them, slashing. If you're Alucard, right? Like and you're doing that. But just this being in these worlds where there are lots of demons and fantasy creatures. I'm a huge D&D guy, right? So what I really wanted to do with my shmup is I wanted to have a mix of this kind of fantasy sci-fi and have, I basically wanted to shoot and blow up and kill a lot of like monsters, right? So it's very much in the DNA of this game. And the Lost Soulless, basically they fulfill two functions. You can see them on screen here right now. One is that they're invulnerable. So they're basically like landmines, right? So anything that lives longer on screen means it becomes more dangerous, right? And even though these guys don't attack you, they block your shots, which keep you from being able to attack other enemies. And so then you're encouraged to see them and explode them as quickly as possible. And so they act kind of like a landmine, in that when you get close to the AOE area effect indicator, then they will pop, and then they basically have what in shmups you call them revenge bullets. So when a enemy dies, it has one last hurrah of bullets that it shoots out. And that's what these guys, they wound up doing. And so, yeah, I call them the Lost Soulless because they're in this living forest. It's very monster-fied, Will-o'-the-Wisp kind of inspiration, right? Where they kind of lure you into these glades, from old mythos, right? And then they would lead you to your doom, right? You see these things in the forest, and that's where these guys came from.
You mentioned how this was a nod to the living forest in Mortal Kombat 2, and that's got to be one of the top 5 best designed levels in a fighting game. Like I also do remember the first time I saw that come up. I'm like, this is cool. It made me want to go play in the woods after that.
You are definitely of my mind because seeing demonic trees and wanting to go play in the woods, that's fucking crazy.
Right? Like, let's go. This boss, another Castlevania nod, I would imagine, right? Given the design and.
Yeah, so well, in this particular case, this just comes from the mythos of the game. So because of fantasy, right? Vampires are very much a thing that I've also loved forever and ever, right? Played lots of Legacy of Kain back in the day, like Vampire the Masquerade, tabletop, White Wolf systems. And, so what I wanted to do here in the mythos of this world, essentially, there's a demonic titan, his name's Srivis, and he's slumbering now. He's been asleep for thousands of years, like 5,000-6,000 years. And when he was forced in this chaotic battle to lay down and forced into sleep, because you can't really kill titans in this particular case, he fell into this dream state. He's basically the size of an island. And then from inside of him, basically, because he was dreaming, he put out like this source of power that people were attracted to. So monsters and people and minions essentially came to live inside of him as this titanic, like cavernous mountain, right? And so what he wound up doing is by attracting all of these living entities, and while he was asleep, he wanted to essentially kill all of his followers to try to wake up, to absorb their power. And one of the ways to do that is to wage war. So he lured these vampire generals, which are this boss fight itself, to him, and basically used his different magi to essentially to take and create this ritual where, like, he's like, come to me, I'll give you my power. They come, they want the power, and then at the moment of dawn, he has his wizards basically cast the spell that encapsulates them into like these stone forms, right? So they're alive, they're getting basically caught into being destroyed, and as a result, now he can summon these things into the world, and they still have autonomy because they're living in these statues. So that's kind of where they came from.
So I think after you release the vinyl soundtrack for the game, I think you and I need to get together, or I'll write the foreword and you write the whole history and legacy of Interstellar Sentinel in anticipation of Interstellar Sentinel 2.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got an art book that we've been jamming on for the last 3 months, and the art book has a lot of the small backstories of where the characters come from. There's, like, I'm very much a game master in that respect, in that I've built up D&D worlds. I've built, so I've kind of built these things up a little bit over time. I mean, this thing's been the lore for the world. I started when I started my Twitch channel about 6 months later. So this was like early 2019. And so even before I knew I was making this game, I was just having fun, basically creating stuff, right? Creating the characters, and the game, the core for DrBossKey very much has like a Mega Man theme, right? So like as you defeat boss monsters, the relics that he has essentially breaks them down into living weapons, right? Living weapons are weapons that have the consciousness of the enemies, the boss monsters, in the weapon form itself. And now DrBossKey has this like living weapons armament, right? So there's a whole bunch of stuff that came from that. That's why we've done mixed medium, like with like art and animation, and then probably closer to 3 years ago at this point, I was like, I found this tool set, Shmup Creator. And I was like, wow, I'm sitting on top of all this really cool stuff. We had all this great art. And I was like, I wonder if we could actually turn this into a shmup. And I started to think about what that could look like. I did some tests with the engine. I got pretty excited about what we could actually accomplish. And here we are all these years later. So it's kind of, no one ever thinks about these things, but yeah, so it's been a wild trip.
It's been a fun journey to watch too, especially when you were doing your Twitch stuff. It's like even our main character here, I'm just like, I remember seeing him on like, when like somebody would sub or something, so it was really cool for me, following your Twitch career and being a big fan of it too. Just seeing some of this stuff come to life in this game. Let's talk about this level, because
yes. So this is the level that takes place inside Srivanix, or Srivis. So this is the fossilized form. And actually the background panels we created for the animated short long before this was a game. So I took the animated short that I made. It was about 7 minutes. I never completely finished it. It's on YouTube. But I basically used the animated short because I made a script for it. I voiced it. Like, I had this whole thing about the origin story of Gondas and Neda, so that's coming up in the next level. This is the sort of like rock monster with the parasitic fairy, and it's a little bit of a like love story and a bunch of other things. And so basically, all of that lore and that animation became the blueprint for how we did basically the world for Interstellar Sentinel. So. So the first 4 levels are basically like that arc of the animated short that I expanded them on. So, and yes, this level is a pain in the ass because it's the first level that takes Gradius cues, right? The environment, the rocks, the ceiling, the floor, all of this stuff is essentially dangerous, right? So you run into it, and it takes a little while to see where that's at. And there's some things I could have designed better, but and then it's a lot. So what do you think?
What do I think? I think this level caused me pain and suffering for a long time until I started labbing it and really realizing that, I mean, there were times when I would play it, I would skip the pacifist mode until I think we talked about earlier. How like, oh no, I need the pacifist mode because I need to have the. You can hear me complaining about it right now. But as frustrated as I was, the more I played it, the more I came to like really appreciate it and try to, dodge the ball. I can't stand those guys, by the way.
Which guys? The hell turrets?
The red ones. The little hell turrets are I can manage. Just those big guys.
Oh, you mean the demon spider tanks? Yeah, those guys are, because the spreads. Yeah, they're rough.
Yeah, they are, especially where you place them, which is kind of like I get it, but it's also like,
yeah, look at that trick. Oh,
I
shit,
know,
that's
man.
Awesome.
But you
it's
said
bad you didn't get the hidden monster trophy here. There's a hidden mini boss. Have you found them hidden mini boss here?
I have not.
There you go.
I fought them on, I think 5, 6, 7, not 8, but 5, 6, and 7. I fought them on.
These ones are gated based on getting the some of the earlier monster trophies. So that's the other side of it.
Gotcha. Give yourself some shout. Maybe that'll be my next run. Get all the monster trophies.
Yeah. There's definitely more. I mean, I said to your credit, right? You said it's about 25, 30 hours that you've spent. I've had people spend 70 hours with the game and never you never see everything.
Oh wow.
I've had people spend that amount of time, and I don't think they've ever gotten their 1 credit clear on heroic, right? So it's just a wide range of different types of players.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've tested and tuned and tweaked this game a lot because I have all these wonderful streaming friends. But you know what streamers do? They play and they text. So they basically text and drive. That's what these people do, right? And the moment, and you know, like when I was do my playthrough of Red Dead Redemption 2, right? I'd be riding my horse across the land, and I'd look down and I'd read some chat, and I'd look back up and I'd fallen off a cliff. I killed my horse. I died. Like, you know, like, so you can do it, but it's dangerous. And because these games are so focused, you know, it completely can get out of control if you aren't on top of your enemy spawns where you're at. You know, you lose focus just for, you know, 10 seconds, and it can change the entire approach to the level itself. It's almost like an orchestrated like ballet or a dance.
100%. And it's one of those things, and you know as well, because you're one of the best channels I've ever followed. About the same, excuse me. But it's like there's always you kind of what a lot of streamers to me have a problem with is that they don't really do a good job of balancing gameplay and chat. You really have to strike that balance, because if you don't, somebody who's there for like, you know, somebody could be there and chat, and then you don't respond to them for 10 minutes almost, and they're gone, you know?
Yep.
So it's like what you said, but then you mentioned, like, you got the other streamers who, like you said, text and drive, if you will. Man, nice reference. They would they'll like, oh, okay, hi chat, and then like, oh, there they go, off the cliff, you know. So it was. I really would like try to. I think you saw me do it right here too. Is like I would remind the chat, like, hey, I'm still with you guys, but it's like I'm focused. I got to get through the game, you know. Like right here, we're taking a break because I was just like, okay.
Well, and you find like. I mean, so right now I'm working on my 1 credit clear of a Kai Katana Shin. It's a fantastic horizontal shmup. Came out on the Xbox 360, developed by Cave. Cave are legendary. They've probably done more shmups on the planet than any other development team. Unfortunately, these are all bygone eras now. It's not profitable to make shmups anymore, so no one makes them, right? Like, yes, there are indie shmups and things like that, but we all do it as hobbies at this point because you can't afford to run an independent game development studio with the profits you're going to make from a shmup. So, and the industry's moved on in a lot of ways too. But anyways, I digress because I'm now up to level 5 that I can play without dying, which is great. But I have to sit down and lab level 5 and lab level 6 because to do it all on a single credit, it is, you know, it's a playthrough is about 25 minutes. It's a long time to be focused. And the moment you lose focus, you're going to pay for it. And you can recover a little bit. You can sometimes bomb your way out, but there are all these skills that come from practicing, just like when you're labbing, you know, like a juggle or a defense, or even just, you know, how you want to string together different attacks to make, in a fighting game, your style, right? How things kind of chain together, how you do your mix-ups between high, mid, low, you know, how you bait things out. Like there's all kinds of aspects to that, right? So, and shmups also follow a lot of that. So it's tough, but there are a lot of transferable skills. So interesting stuff.
There are, and it's, you know, by the way, that section I think that I just passed with all the red turrets, that I think that's what frustrated me the most in this level. Until I
until you figure out the trick where you can get down to the bottom, right?
Yes, exactly. But what I wanted to mention to you too was you know, you mentioned labbing, like, and it's what, you know, as a fighting game player, you know all about that, especially now I'm learning as playing shmups, like you got to do that too. And I think in a way that's kind of what turns like the general audience off, where it's not like a Call of Duty where you can just go in there and like, okay, if you can basically aim genuinely well, you don't need to go sit there and like, you know, shoot bots on end, you know, you're good. Where fighting games you don't necessarily, in this, if you want to get good per se, you don't necessarily have that
look
luxury.
at those dodges. Holy shit. Sorry.
Right?
And then you got plonked right there. You were alive for almost a good minute in that section.
I know. This was another section that I just couldn't stand because it's like I have to do pacifist to get the life, and here I am. And then I finally realized, oh, I don't have to move around all the damn time. You know, I can kind of like stay still and then move. You know.
Let's fucking go. We got through pacifist mode.
Dude, look how excited you are.
I know. I'm so like stoked. Like we did it. We did it. All right.
You had way more struggle on this level than I've seen anyone else, so it was really cool to see that this was one of your barriers, even compared to like level 3. You know, but some of it too, right? Like some of it's the language of the game too.
Yeah.
You know, in terms of like how do you, you know, like you see a lot of stuff. There is so one of the things I built the game for, right, is I built it for silky smooth analog stick control, right? Like my thumbs, I can still use them. They're getting old, right? But I being able to have refined control, because most people when they're playing on analog stick, they just do this, right? They're like,
they just
yeah.
Pacifist.
And if you're flailing all over the place, then you actually have less control. And when I'm asking you to do things like navigate through a wave of bullets, right? It's counterintuitive to see all the danger and to try to be as calm as possible to navigate it, right?
And you'll see it here in this boss fight too. There's a couple of times where I really kind of like just have to make, like you said, macro dodging. You know, where it's like those macro movements of like, okay, wait for it to come, move, wait for it to move, wait for it to, you know.
But we don't.
Yep.
So
Yeah, and so so folks know, so micro dodging is if you have a string of bullets, it's dodging between the bullets. Macro dodging is the same string of bullets, but you can go around them. So they're wider dodging movements, and it's mixing the skills together. If you find yourself where you have to micro dodge, it becomes more dangerous, or being dangerous is high risk, right? So where you can macro dodge or understand the difference is quite helpful. So like for instance, macro dodging around these big orbs, the energy orbs, you can't micro dodge through them. So it kind of reinforces that style of gameplay.
this guy, I think I struggled with him a lot. Like, it's weird with him where it was, I would either have a run where I could beat him fairly easily, or I would have a run where it's like, oh, you're going to take like 3 or 4 lives from me.
Mm-hmm. It really, so one is your bottom, your power shot is 10 times more powerful than your rapid fire shot in all situations. And so part of this is that, so Nada, who's the fairy that you're fighting here, and the Mammer, which is it's like if a hammer and a mace had a baby, that's why I call it the Mammer. Both of those also absorb shots. The longer they stay alive, the more dangerous things get. So if you don't focus on bursting them down, which you did here, right?
Yeah.
Then you're doing a lot less damage to the boss. So, and then part of it too, it's about learning how to be effective against the boss. Oh, look, here comes the advanced monster trophy. Oh my God.
For that, yeah, the Blue Angels, yeah, there you go.
Oh, look at this. Oh, you were in pocket right now. Look at this.
I know.
Gondis moves forward. You still now, and the cool thing is you can't actually get to that second demonic mecha chopper here. Now you can. Oh, you're in a crazy spot though. I also really enjoy that in the game. I made all missiles, physical projectiles that you could shoot and destroy.
Yeah, that was really cool.
It was nice having just clean language for stuff like that.
How about you have a seat
What-
now?
By the way, this flux capacitor weapon that didn't exist in its form until a month ago in the last release I did.
No way.
Mm-hmm.
I had a super right there, and I'm just like, why didn't I use? Oh, I use it right there. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's all right.
Oh,
I'm
you
going
just got
way better than I did
plunked.
last time.
Boss is almost dead though.
I think what we should have done too is I should have put up a counter of how many times I say that, like, especially when we get to the later levels. This isn't going to be the one. This isn't going to be the one.
Mm-hmm.
Which is funny because the one before this that I made it to the final, the secret boss, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that was it. I messed it up. That was it. I'm just that whole run. I'm thinking, all right, I got this. And then this one, I'm just like, yep, this is it. You'll see. It's just really funny for me. Like I kept saying that the whole time, and there it was.
So when I first imagined basically Interstellar Sentinel, it was basically DrBossKey shoot 'em up until I figured out what I want to call it. But when I first imagined what this could be, I imagined DrBossKey fighting Gondis and Nada, the Mosses here.
We lost too many lives there. But we're going.
Yeah, I can hear you. You've got the worry, but you're there. You're over the curve.
Yeah.
So
well,
when I first imagined this, I imagined DrBossKey fighting a kaiju version of Gondis. So, and it turns out when you're fighting a kaiju version of anything, you do shit like you need to fight ankles, you need to fight a crotch, you got to fight a torso, you got to fight a head, right? And because they're building size, and then it only took me, a few thousand hours to get to this point in making the game, right? So, but it's funny how those key images stick in your mind.
What was it, Cameron, when he was talking about what he came up with the Terminator? He said it was a skull with just the reddest eyes that struck fear into him, and he said that's what he started with the Terminator. So yeah, you're right. when you have those ideas, they just stick with you. It's like, nah, I feel like that's the universe like calling you, saying you have to do this. Like you have to tell this story.
Choice now. We have to.
Yeah, Terminator is one of my favorite movies of all time.
Oh yeah, me too. I used to prefer. I love them both dearly, but I used to prefer the first one to the second one, and now it's like, don't ask me which one I like better because the answer will be both.
They're both fantastic
Yeah,
movies.
they are.
Yeah, so here, one of the first times you actually are starting to unlock mini bosses, right?
Yep.
So
It was level, like I said, I think I fought level 5, level 6,
Those
and
good
level
dodges.
7 to this point.
good macro dodging. Look at that.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Look at a micro there.
It started
Yeah.
coming together, like,
I'll
again,
take it.
repetition over and over. The more I played it, the more some of these concepts. I think it was one of my, I know I've, like I said, I'm only posted about 10 of these or whatever, but
Which is awesome.
thank you. But I played through, I think I was up to 21 or 22 playthroughs by the time we get to the end of this. And it wasn't until like playthrough, I think 16, where, because when we first talked about the game and you were talking to me about shmups, I was like, bullet leading. Oh, okay, that's where I mentioned it earlier. Where, okay, yeah. And then I was like, oh, like that little light goes off in your head.
Yep.
You know?
It clicks. You're like, oh wait, like where I'm at is where the bullets are going to home to.
Yeah.
So basically, where you're at on screen is then, and you can see it there when we were looking at that previous. So when she shoots those like triangular or those V-shaped Homer bullets, depending on where you're at, is where they spawn from. So if you're in the middle of the screen, you've now created the middle of the screen to be dangerous with all of those bullets. So being in the upper top or the bottom of the screen then helps you lead those bullets to be able to better dodge, but also to manage the attacks of other enemies. Right? Super interesting stuff.
It's funny for me watching my older plays, like where I would stay mostly to the back of the screen, and then now watch it where I'm like, I'm so conscious of that, trying to be in the middle of the screen, so I got more room to move with too. You know, I think that's another technique of shmups that, you know, it's because a lot of the players I know would play in the back because they were like, well, I want to make sure I have enough time to dodge. It's like, okay, well, yeah, there's a technique to that, but at the same time, now that I know more about this style of play, it's like, no, staying in the center of the screen is where you want to be.
Dude,
So
look,
you
you're
just-
dialed here.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, right? So, I mean, the edges of the screen are always most dangerous because that's where enemies come from, right? And I'm an asshole because enemies can come from any edge of the screen, right? Less so from the left side, but I do it, right? And there are techniques for dealing with that. So, but also there's this other thing that's in shmups called point blanking. So basically what it is in the old days, and now it can just be a design aspect, but you had hardware limitations with how many bullets you could render. And so a lot of times what your ship would shoot would be like, oh, you can only have 5 bullets on screen at a single time, right?
Right.
And so if your ship got closer to the enemy, well, because if you have 5 bullets out, the moment the first bullet is impacted the enemy, you would spawn a new bullet. So then being closer to enemies meant you could do more damage, but it was more dangerous because you were regenerating your bullets faster, as opposed to waiting for them to travel across the whole screen. So that concept is also alive here in the form that when you have spread shots or when you have the short range weapons, getting closer means you're doing damage faster to the enemies. It's a little bit more dangerous, but again, screen clearing enemies and getting rid of them frees you up to then attack other aspects of what's coming next, right? And the more passive you are, the longer you let things live, the more dangerous everything becomes until you get snowballed.
You know, you mentioning that I just started thinking about all the times I played Galaga, which and I was like, yeah, you know, he's right. My bullets would come back faster when the enemies would get closer. I don't know about Space Invaders. I've played Space Invaders, but I didn't play it that much. But I think Galaga was one I
Galaga's
played
fantastic.
It's
so good.
It's the GOAT.
Dude. And I sunk crazy amount of hours into, I was huge game guy. I was very, very fortunate, very lucky to grow up my entire life with games. I mean, since I was, one of the first games I ever played was Pac-Man in the arcade. You know, I was like 4 years old, and pinball games and, you know, like Moon Patrol and like there, you know, I was very fortunate living here in California for the most part to experience all that.
That was one thing. I'm not from California, but I wish that I had lived here, like, you know, during that boom, because it just seemed like everywhere you turned there was an arcade.
Arcade culture was super fun. Also, you know, I mean, fighting games were one of the last things that you kind of kept arcades going.
Yeah.
And back in the day, right, like when I was playing Tekken, like encountering that first arcade board was huge for me. And then to realize that Namco would roll out long before they got to the consoles, they would roll out the versions of the game to playtest, tune, and balance games. They'd have tournaments, and they would do that, you know, as Namco in their own arcades. And so I was very lucky to get a job at a Namco arcade when I was a late teenager, and I tried so hard, and there was because I wanted to be able to play fighting games with, you know, with randos, right, and put up your quarter, and you know, to just enjoy that whole aspect. It's sad to see that times have changed. You know, consoles and the home market have really taken over. You know, and you know, for the most part, online play is it's better than it's ever been in terms of rollback code and, you know, networking, but it's not quite the same. It's not the same as being elbow to elbow against another person.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's still, you know, you still get your round ones or whatever that still have, you know, they have Street Fighter 6, but it takes them like eons to get the Street Fighter 6. Oh, hey, this is when I got to follow in the stream. So
Yeah.
but yeah, it was one of those things of like, I remember I was very young when I got Street Fighter 2, but there was just, even at that age though, it was just so fun going to the arcade and like, you know, I'll play my brother or I'll play, you know, my friend and just seeing who was better, and it was it's a loss. I mean, we still have it technically with online, but like you said, it's a lost art, and I really wish we could.
It's also delayed, right? So I mean, I came from a culture of like, I was a latchkey kid, which basically meant that I would get out of school and I would come home and let myself in because my parents were working, right? You know, in that respect, the you know, father and stepmother, and then I would make my lunch snack and do all my things like that, right? So, but it also meant that I grew up in a time where if we wanted to do multiplayer, it was only local co-op, and you would go to your friend's house and, you know, endless hours playing Street Fighter 2 until like the sun comes up type of thing, right? So, and it was a joy to be alive, and a lot of that, it exists to some degree, but people have to seek it out because it's not, you know, this isn't where we're at with the modern world.
It's a different world in a lot of ways.
By the way, in that last level, the boss Skullzor, that was my nod to the Skull Lord boss in Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and it was the very first boss that I prototyped in the engine, the Shmup Creator engine. One of my holy grails, what I really want to build is I want to build a Metroidvania shmup, and I want to have like a weapon configurator, a ship configurator, right, and then have the adventure aspects, and then bring in kind of the bullet hell. So I've got more games that I want to work on than I'll ever be able to finish in a lifetime.
That's the sign of a true artist right there. When you got all this stuff you want to do, and you know, like, oh, after this I'm probably never going to get to. But that's an interesting idea to take those two genres, because I don't think we've really seen anything like that. I mean,
there are a few games out there that have attempted it, so not quite the way I want to put it together, but yeah, absolutely. But I'm a huge fan of, you know, I mean, Metroid and Super Metroid were huge milestones for me as a kid when I first encountered them. Super inspiring, like tone, and again, like it comes back. What you're fighting monsters or aliens in this particular case, and it's, you know, so a lot of what I love and what's been poured into Interstellar Sentinel comes from, you know, all of those fond memories of having those experiences back in the day.
Super Metroid, in my personal opinion, and you might think differently, that is the best SNES game ever made, in my opinion.
It is amazing.
Yeah. Mega Man X would be probably a close number 2, to be honest, because I love that game too.
I was just watching Mega Man 9, actually, a playthrough from my buddy Ratson just yesterday. It was super fun to see it. I mean, the game's old now at this point, but just cool to see how tight a lot of the designs were back then. You know, and again, a lot of times, like modern gaming, you know, like the concept is this, like gameplay density matters, right? And a lot of modern gaming, and there's lots of different types of games, so this is just my own, you know, flavor, but it has a lot of filler content.
Does
fetch this thing, go to this, and I love my sandbox games. I love my, you know, my Skyrims, my Oblivions, Morrowinds, right? Those are fantastic. They scratch amazing itches. But I also don't like a ton of story in my game. I don't like a lot of cutscenes. You know, like I love Kojima. Metal Gear Solid series is fantastic. Do I need 12-minute cutscenes? No, not really, right? Like So, but look, they're there for some people. Some people really are into them. Not a big deal. But when I was designing and developing my own games, like gameplay density, right? And this is why you've got, here's 3,000-4,000 hours to boil down to, like basically an hour experience, right? Where anyone can sit down and play through, and then there's more of the game. There's more if you want to find it and explore for it, but it's not, it's not heavy-handed in that respect.
I find
my own.
I find too with those games is that, and for me, Metal Gear Solid 3 is my favorite game of all time because for the simple fact that I didn't know video games could do that, and what I mean by that is I didn't know they could be that subversive and actually like really get me invested in the stories, and and it was fun to play.
Characters.
But the older I get, the more I agree with you of like, yeah, it's like I would much rather have a game like this, or a game like a Dark Souls that I'm gonna pour thousands of hours into trying to beat the bosses, explore the world. And even like you said, the sandbox games are kind of like that now too, where they we get these 12-minute cutscenes, and then the fetch quests aren't interesting because they're usually the same thing, and it's just a game like, am I really gonna go back and play like something like, I don't know, GTA 3 after I complete the whole thing? Probably not, or at least not for a couple of years. Where something like this I'll come back to, something like a Tekken I'll come back to.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's
dude, you're cracking. It's cool to watch you getting through this. Like, so this is one of those cases where being a little bit more aggressive, because you've got the ridge line for the ground plane, right? So that's it also absorbs shots. So if you sit back too far, then the enemies will build up, and you kind of get screwed. So, but being aggressive here and continuing to clear the enemies is huge. A huge part of like staying on top of this section of the level.
It was one of those things too of like something just kept telling me, just get aggressive, just get the right weapons, just start shooting. And that's part of what I was doing here. And we'll get to my all-time favorite boss in your game coming up here soon.
Yeah. Oh, it's the Astral Ripper is your favorite. I was wondering.
He's the best. He's coming over next Tuesday. Actually, we're gonna have a barbecue.
He'll deliver some turkey to the Astral Ripper.
Real quick, I just wanted to say that, like, it's what's funny about these games, like all games, I guess, is like you think the final boss is going to be like the hardest boss of the game, and a number of times that's true. But I always find it like a boss like this, who's like the boss, but like two or three bosses before the main boss, is always the one that just has like the most broken, challenging stuff. So talk to us about the Astral Whisperer, as I famously called him, the Gastral Pooper.
Yeah, so you're asking just in terms of like the challenge, or
what how you designed him, and how you designed him to be the challenging SOB that he is.
Oh yeah. Okay, so one of the things that especially in horizontal shmups, right? So you'll notice here, like, it's like it's my signature. I love, like, one of the reasons why I'm called DrBossKey is because Doctor stands for my basically my doctorate in video games, which doesn't exist, hence it's silly. And also, when I played arcade games, it was about putting up high score leaderboard initials. So DOC was what I chose because my normal initials were just boring, right? So CGH. And it was very easy to identify. And then boss, because I love all things bosses, right? Like, bosses are like the sort of like take all your skills and then build up your challenge and put those skills to test, right? And then key is basically as old as game, like you're unlocking doors, treasure chests, right? Like you're finding the key for the boss rooms, right? And it's kind of all mixed together. So with that in mind, by the way, this is all super trippy, right? I apologize for anyone that's going to have seizures playing my game.
We're going to another dimension.
How else do you banish a freaking, like a boss back to his dimension, right?
Exactly.
So, and I was like, well, let's see what I could do. And that's my straight silliness. So as I played all these different shmups and games, I really like, and I played a ton of Gunvein. Gunvein's a vertical shmup. Very, very bullet hell, unapologetic. It is some of the best like gameplay, but it is you have to have some big balls to play a Gunvein. Like, to really want to sit down and play it, it's incredibly hard. And one of the things that they do, Boghog is a fantastic designer as well. And he created a lot of these boss patterns, and we all are borrowing from each other in a lot of ways. But a lot of these boss patterns he created where he would have Bullet strings are curtains, which then would create paths for you to navigate. And then while you're navigating those paths with these kind of curtains, he would then put in secondary attacks to make you have to dodge within these curtains. And so I didn't want to go that crazy. But when I often call like when we have the plasma beams at the top waving, they're keeping you in this kind of like zone that you have to be aware of. And then you have the attacks that come from basically the boss that then create these micro dodging patterns, or macro dodging in a lot of cases. And so it's sort of like the rub your head and pat your belly kind of thing, right? I'm asking you to do a couple things at the same time, and that creates an extra level of challenge. So I took a lot of inspiration from those types of experiences, and I kind of rolled that into this boss. And is level 6, right? So
level 6, yeah.
And basically after level 4, I take the gloves off and I design the game in a different way, where some of the layering and the welcome to the game, like you've built up a number of skills at this point, and so I wanted to put all those skills to the test, and so I wound up kind of creating some of these patterns.
Well, and that's kind of like the typical pattern that a lot of the games you and I played as kids would follow too. Is like, okay, level 4, all right, easy mode's over now. Now it's time to white knuckle.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, level 3 is usually like that rite of passage, the gauntlet, especially in shmups. The level 3s are very notorious. But then again, a lot of shmups are about 25 to 30 minutes. So, and that's like 5 or 6 levels.
Yeah.
So you're like, all right, you're already over the halfway point. So how far can you actually push it?
This level just seems like, for the impression that I had when I would play it multiple times, like this is level 2 on steroids.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so one of the tropes, one of the design patterns that I wound up using for the first 4 levels is I would introduce you to an enemy, and then I would let you defeat that enemy basically about 3 times, and then I'd introduce a new enemy. And I would kind of mix and match between bigger enemies that took more shots and damage, and more popcorn enemies that you can kill in a shot. And so every time I introduced a new enemy, that then gave me the opportunity to remix those enemies as you kind of progressed, not counting the monster trophy enemies on top of this. But basically, look at it. I forgot about the claw that comes from the bottom there. That's a beast. Oh, man.
Threw me off. It definitely threw me off there.
And so what I wound up doing is when you got to level 4, or you get past level 4, the next levels are like, oh, cool. You now have all of these new enemies that aren't new. They're remixed over the course of the levels. You know how to deal with them. How can I then build up another layer of that skill acumen, and then test you a new way? So I still introduce new enemies and do some of those concepts, but I don't do it for the enemies you'd seen before. And so it's kind of a layering process. Right. And then the other aspect of this is that I have the monster trophy enemy system. And the rule of thumb is, as you continue to screen clear enemies, if you kill everything, you get monster trophies. And when you get monster trophies, that then creates new waves of enemies. And depending on which monster trophies they are, they become more and more challenging. So it's kind of like a dynamic difficulty system on top of that. I mean, you played the game 30 hours and you're still finding new stuff, right?
Well, but I mean, that's the mark to me of a great game, and why, I have such high praise for this, because I mean, look, we're still finding combos in Street Fighter, Super Street Fighter 2 to this
you took
day.
some damage. Yeah, absolutely, right?
I'm getting hit, like, but that's the thing, is like, when you make a game like this where there's still just stuff to discover every time you play, it's like that's, to me, that's good replayability. That's why I want to keep playing your game. I want to find those extra things, and I think that's, again, there's a lot of praise I have for you for the design of this game.
Thanks,
and that
man.
is just one of the many that I think you did very, very well here, especially.
Bro, that was.
I tell people this. I'm like, I get mad in the moment, especially in fighting games, as you've seen. But it's like, when I go back and watch it later, I'm the first person laughing at myself. Yeah, dumbass, you should have gotten hit there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I know you've had a little fun laughing at my misery when I'm getting hit and there's stuff on the screen, and I'm like, what? But
dude, games give me fucking Tourette's. Because I am insanely competitive, right? If it's just even me against the machine,
right,
and it's fighting game guy, right? Like I could write a whole manifesto on how games can help improve your experience as a human, but also human on human competition, like, what do you say? Like sharpens like, right? Like,
Exactly.
and it's the same thing, right? Like, if I hadn't had thousands of hours of friends that were willing to sit down and just play fighting games and get better, right? I wouldn't have been able to develop the craft and skill level that I have. And I'm not the best fighting game guy ever, right? But it's like, as I like to say, everyone starts in a pond, and sometimes you'll become the big fish in the pond, and then you move to a new pond, and then you realize you're now the small fish in a bigger pond, right? Like,
Exactly.
And you're always looking for the pond that has the best fish, right? So like and because that will level up your skills well beyond anything else. Like, you can't really get that from just playing the AI. You can't get that just from doing lab time. You have to get the lab time in with friends, our competitors, right?
Yeah. And like lab time is like, people think lab time is just, oh, I'm in practice mode. No, lab time is like, okay, these things you've been working on in practice mode, go into an actual match and try those, and it's like, you're probably going to lose because, I mean, especially playing something like a Tekken, it's like when you're trying something new, yeah, you're going to lose because you're not used to implementing it successfully yet. It's just, it's like when you play this game over and over, it's like, it's repetition. It's what gives you, I think this is where, just watching this now, I think this is really where I started to doubt if this was going to be the one, because I'm like, I'm getting hit a lot. I'm definitely losing one life. I might lose two.
Good super on that.
Yeah.
But you're also on top of you're using a lot of rapid fire. You're starting to alternate a little bit, but that bottom weapon does a lot more damage. So you're kind of weaving it in a bit more too.
Yeah.
So,
which is something in my early playthroughs, I definitely was not doing at all. I was just like, okay, I'll just spam the light weapon and then just try to dodge,
People are very comfortable with the rapid shot, and the thing is, the rapid shot fulfills a very nice thing, right? In that it's quick shooting, but it also is aligned to your weak spot. So in shmups, a lot of people are essentially not looking at their ship or their character; they're looking at their bullet stream, and that bullet stream leads back to where they're at. So you don't have to, you don't have to focus as much on the player character itself. Like, I like to say that. So one of the things that I find really interesting, and this is mechanics, right? So you have what I call macro vision, like being able to see the whole screen, right? And as things get more and more dangerous, the bullets get closer to your enemy, you wind up having like more focused vision, right? And so the more focused your vision is, the more likely it is you're not gonna be able to see the stuff around you, right? So you're always trying to kind of min-max, like or you're always switching back and forth between your being able to see everything, your macro vision and your micro vision. And the further you can stay away from having to look at just a fixed point being your ship, the more likely you can dodge things because you can see things coming further out, right? So it's this kind of interesting trade-off, but it's a whole thing that takes practice.
Yeah.
And the more aggressive the game gets, the more bullets, the more bullet curtains, right? The more you're focused or forced into this focused vision.
Exactly. And there I am sitting there right now just being like, yep, this isn't going to be it. This is not going to be the one. I'm just like, oh, little do you know, right? Like,
so in this challenge version of the level, this is also, this takes place inside Srivis. And so it takes place inside the demonic titan, right? And so this is after Srivis basically burned down his entire world and, like is inside of him. So he tried to wake up, but this is the failed attempt at it. So the level takes place after that cataclysm.
There's just such a lore to this game that I really want to read. Like an animated short would be great. So would a comic book.
Yeah, like
there's so many ways.
I'm not saying never.
Never say never, right? When you mentioned Castlevania, I kept thinking about our main guy here. I'm like, oh wow, the wings, yeah, like, and
this is giving you some of the Alucard vibes. Absolutely.
Yes. God, like you mentioned that as like one of those top 10 games you'd want on an island. I would almost agree with you because it's just so deep,
Castlevania Symphony Night?
Yes.
It's a fantastic game.
It's incredible.
Oh.
Like, I go back and it's kind of like for a while when I would watch. We talked about Tarantino the other day. We're big Tarantino guys. It's like, we talked about Pulp Fiction, and for a while it was like whichever one I watched between Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction was my favorite, and that's kind of how I feel about Super Metroid and Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Is like whichever one I just played, that's my favorite one.
Yep, absolutely. By the way, if you haven't, and you're itching to play a game like that, Bloodstained is a fantastic game. So from Igarashi, right? So basically, one of the main producers for
Ridiculous.
Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Fantastic game.
So
I want to.
I have it. I am at the final boss, but I haven't beaten
Oh,
the final
okay.
boss because
Okay.
I want to 100% everything,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that game is
Nice.
That might be one of the best games of the last decade.
Well, I mean, unlike when we Mighty Number 9, right? That was supposed to be this sort of like kickstarted, Mega Man
Yeah.
revival, and it was really sad to see that it was undercooked, and that magic that made Mega Man what it is didn't translate over very well to the to that project.
Yeah, I felt so bad because I really wanted that to be
I
something.
might have used that a little too early, but fuck.
Yep, I kickstarted it as well. I kickstarted Bloodstained, and then I had to wait for 4 years. It was a long wait, but I was super excited. And they're still doing updates, right? Which is great, and
awesome.
adding to it. So,
It was I was at a friend's house in San Diego, and she had just gotten it, and she showed it to me. I'm like, I'm buying this as soon as I get home.
day one.
Yep. That guy right there, that little brood guy.
The fairy broodmother. Yep.
He's made my list of enemies that anger me quite greatly in this game. Can you talk about him?
Sure. So it's a she.
Sorry.
So
Sorry, we don't want to
it's all right.
misgender anybody here. I do
How would
apologize,
you
brood
know?
mother.
Yeah, absolutely, right. So, so when you fought Gondas and Nada, the giant demonic, well, it's not really not a giant, but basically Gondas and Nada are fused together. So you fight Nada, who's the large version, and she's fused with Gondas, and so they're basically parasitic fairies. They're a species of enemy where when they hatch, they only have like they're kind of like dragonflies, and that they only have a short period of time, just weeks, to go out into the world and find something that they can bind with in order to survive. And so what they do is they seek out the most dangerous enemies, most powerful enemies in the land, and then they start this kind of courtship to essentially bond themselves with their hosts, right? So the thing is that I need to, every time I create a creature, I then I kind of start with just like what's cool, what is kind of what sings to me, right? And a lot of these character types, we spent especially for the boss characters, we spent about 3 months on average doing iterations. It's probably a few hundred hours for every design, right? And I always go through the process of like designing the key shots, designing the action shot, designing the front and the back and the weapon designs and the things that are really important. And we have 10, 12 like boss monsters that are huge, not counting even the game, but just in the DrBossKey world. And so these parasitic fairies,
Come on.
they create this broodmother, and then the broodmother basically sits and basically incubates these eggs, and then they hatch these fairy swarms that then go out into the world, and most of them die all the time, and there's some exceptions. And so with the fairy broodmother, which also I did the boss version coming up in this level, right? So with them in this enemy type here, I want to really bring that concept of the lore to the world. And so you have the sacks, you have like she herself doesn't attack, but she basically launches the fairy swarms. And the thing is those fairies, they absorb shots, right? So it makes it to where if you don't get low, or you have a weapon that's piercing, they take up so many shots that then again the fairies start to live longer and longer, and they wind up producing more bullets. So all the enemies in the game, especially if they have a few more hit points, all have some tricks to figure out how to defeat them, right? And so with them in particular, getting low and staying underneath the fairies or killing the fairies very quickly and then being able to kill the nest is because once you destroy the nest, the fairies no longer spawn. But it's one of those cases where what attracts your attention, and the more that they stay out there, the more bullets they put out, and then that then makes you have to respond, and then it creates kind of a like a panic moment, right, where you start to get snowballed and overwhelmed. So that's where those guys came from, and kind of the tricks behind them.
It's so interesting just hearing this stuff, because that enemy was just so. Every time they would come up, like, oh great, well here's at least 2 hit points, But you mentioned to me once that this level 8, it was your kind of like the first motion level in the game, if you will, where it's like you're kind of moving up and down. I think you said it was another Castlevania reference. Correct?
Yeah, this is basically like an on rails version of like exploring the world, right? So this is so we changed the script here. So in level 3, which is also the only other environment level, where you're only basically moving from left to right. I really want to essentially have verticality, which is really cool. So you're going up, you're going down, like you've got all these little areas in which you're navigating through a more I think more dynamic and slightly more dangerous environment. People do better with this environment because they've had the skills from playing up to level 3, but also because it's red, it's a little bit easier to see the environmental obstacles.
Yeah.
Dude, this is freaking tough right here. This is one of my favorite spots in the game.
Oh, it's one of those things that it's like I'm sure there's complaints about it somewhere, but I actually love this part because it's so challenging,
Yeah. Dude, look at that. Look, and when you get I think you missed you supered, which is great, but it's that crossover where the beams come back and forth and being able to stay in that pocket. It's so tough. And this was just as I was playing and tuning and iterating, this was just one of those things where it's a happy accident. I wanted to do lasers, and I wanted to do kind of a laser corridor. And then I was like, well, let me see what happens if I just put them on backwards and forwards splines, waypoints. And then I was like, whoa. And so I sometimes, game, like I make the game, I can't make the game just for my skill level because that's a little crazy, right? But I can then find and iterate and have, it's like Bob Ross. I find happy accidents and then I can sort of like build more gameplay around that.
Oh, look at that little happy accident. Found a little thing going on.
Little happy tree. Little happy tree here.
On.
3 lives left in the bank.
Three in the bank. I was definitely doubting myself at this point.
3 lives.
Which I think in the next to last playthrough, I had 3 lives going in.
But 3 lives, final level.
I've had players play up to essentially the credits level, and then one of my best friends on the planet, he's also a big shmup guy from back in the day, but he's like, yeah, that is a little too much. I'm not saying change it, but it's like it's gonna take a lot of like work for me to figure out how to beat that boss.
I think we went to it.
See, I think I've mentioned you a couple of times now, and I'll mention it again. The stuff that like I'm weird because the stuff for people that is hard in games usually ends up being easy for me, but the stuff that's easier for most people ends up being super hard for me. So it's like this I didn't mind because like okay, it's the secret boss, and that's kind of the joke, evil Dr. DrBossKey. Yeah, it should be incredibly
I think one of the first times I ever encountered the concept of an evil version of a hero was it was Zelda. It was Zelda 2.
That's right.
And to some degree, some of that is inspired where this comes from, right? Also, it's like if we're gonna do a credits level, then like we definitely need credits, but why not do something fun here? And so coming back to the lore of Dr. DrBossKey and the world and what that looks like, basically, as Dr. DrBossKey defeats enemies, he takes their abilities, right? It's very Mega Man-esque, right? And so. The ship, by the way, was how we launched the game, and eventually I have an alternate where the ship can come back and all of that. So I let the ship in, and the ship is using a lot of attacks, both from your own arsenal, but also from like the bosses. That's why it shoots demons and it's shooting out a bunch of things. Oh, is that what you did? So you got the secret? Oh, and you're just burning them down. Nice.
That's what I did. I got it, and then I got the hit point, and then. Yep. Once I got
the fuck down.
It's so good.
Wasn't excited at all,
Oh, you're trying hard. Your try-hard pants are in the upright position.
Yeah, they are. They're
look at you rubbing your head and patting your belly right now. Oh, you took some damage from the plasma beam.
This motherfucker came back again.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
There
Congratulations.
It's over, Johnny. It's over, DrBossKey. I did it. The 1cc is done. Let's go.
Sweep the leg, Johnny.
We got him. Oh man.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And
It's over, Johnny. Goodbye and good night. Ba-bang, smooch, all done.
not
You
excited at all
only
to complete it.
You only, there are 4 endings in the game. That's just the first ending.
I know. I'm gonna
You
go
came
back.
and you saw the sights. Congratulations.
Exactly. I was there.
Aw.
I did my stuff. I contributed. I did my thing.
And 610 million, pretty nice.
I'll take it's it's no 26 billion or anything, but but no. Oh wait, hold on. That was
Last time on the 1cc challenge. What? Oh,
I
did a good
hit
time.
that accidentally. I don't know. Oh, I know what it's doing. It's playing through.
Oh, all good.
Yeah.
So
but,
the holy grail of the game, and I haven't done it yet myself, is to play through the whole game without dying. Because basically there's a few things that happen. So one is that every time you destroy a monster trophy, you then have a medal. And every time you gain a medal, it helps your chain combo multiplier have another 100 on the chain combo multiplier.
wow.
And chain combo multiplier is any score you get gets multiplied against your chain combo multiplier. So you get this thing that happens where you're playing for 0 deaths and you get like 35, 36 like medals and you're starting to sweat, right? And your score is just getting unclamped. It gets unhinged into like the 2.64 billion, right? Like, and then what I did is I tied together, like in order to chase all that score, you have multiple endings, right? Like the best ending in the game is pretty fantastic. You can technically look it up, but it'll definitely make you laugh when you see it. But also the mini bosses are tied to that. Like the game is at peak difficulty when you're going for for basically your 1 credit clear with 0 deaths, right? So
Yeah.
and that's where I find all the challenge and skill at my level that challenges me. And the cool part is like so there are a lot of really talented shmup players, way more talented than I am at shmups. And I've seen a few of those folks. I've sent 1 credit clear pins now to Northern Ireland and Florida and Connecticut. So these folks that show up and they're spending probably somewhere between 7 and 10 hours to get their first 1 credit clear. And I'm like, all right, cool, welcome. That is awesome, right? They do it on heroic. They got all their stuff. And then I explained to them like this next level. And I had a buddy who his name's Quake Duke Nukem, and he was like, he's played the game a few times at this point, and the game is not crazy punishing hard. It's again supposed to be welcoming, but it's layered, right? And so he just realized he's like, oh. The biggest challenge for the game is to do what I was just talking about, the 0 death run, right? And he's like, at that point, the game really opens up, and you have like, you have that skill level that I'm playing at this point. So it's really cool to watch these folks like as they're pulling apart, right? And some of these guys are now 40, 50 hours into the game, so and they haven't gotten, like, no one has yet, myself included, has gotten their 0 death 1 credit clear yet in the game. And I think my best run, I think it was about up to level 7 is the best that I've done. And then I lost it in level 7. And it's just like, oh, it's so hard, but it's amazing.
And that will be the next challenge that I will probably undertake. But it's such a really, and again, for me, you kind of saw the genesis in a way of the arcade era.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of growing up right as it was booming. So it was, and I would see games like this all the time. So it was really cool to like play something, because a lot of games say they're a throwback to they try and they're successful to varying degrees. But I really feel like one thing that makes this game separate from the pack is that it really feels like you could walk into an arcade in 1991 and Interstellar Sentinel would be sitting right next to R-Type 2 or whatever, or it'd be right next to Galaga. And I think that's a great thing. It feels like the perfect retro throwback. I mean, obviously we got the updated bells and whistles. Nothing's going to be pixelated like it was back then, but
pixel art style is a thing.
It is. I mean, I'm not saying that it's not, but I'm saying like it's not.
Yeah.
This would really fit in well in that era, and that was one big positive I had of it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, it scratches a lot of those itches, and I mean, we all stand on the giants of the folks that that came before us, and it's been wonderful to have just this little passion project, right? Like, and I think if the game, and so, I would love to do an arcade version for the game. If I were to do an arcade version of the game, then I would remove a bunch of like like if I wanted to make it hard, like in that respect, then I mean to make the game hard is not super difficult. I just take your hit points, knock them down. I take the amount of lives you have, knock them down, right?
Yeah.
Reduce the continues type of thing, and turn into a credit feeder. Like it's also not nearly as like, I mean, it's not like a Dodonpachi. It's, like it's not a like crazy hard. It's not a Crimson Clover where like you play that game on arcade mode and you're going to cry. And you're going to cry in a great way. It's an amazing game, but it is like the genesis of like, it's there to eat all of your quarters, right? I get good or get off the machine, kid, right? Like, it's that type of thing where if you get really good at games like that, your expression of playing the game attracts the attention of other people, and the phenomena of like crowds starting to form around you. Like, people tell you like they're going for their high scores in like Pac-Man or Donkey Kong, like seeing this high level of skill play, right? It all comes back to this kind of aspect of that. So it's been a lot of fun to just reignite some of my own passion over the last few years to reconnect with some of these concepts I haven't thought about in a while.
And really create kind of like you just mentioned, those experiences that, somebody young who didn't live through the arcade boom like we did may not have. And you're right. Like we're drawn like moss to the flame to somebody trying to accomplish something. And I think that's really awesome. And I think that's one of the main things why you've been very successful at creating your own little community around the game with the 1cc, your own Discord for the game, which is awesome. Great people in there, very helpful people in there too. And that's, talk about that a little bit, creating the community and getting to know the players and sending the pins. I mean, you did a little bit, but let's expand on that.
Yeah, sure. So one of the things in the shmup, so it's kind of interesting in that because shmups aren't talked about really anymore in the mainstream, they're not covered by press, right? Shmups have been kind of antiquated or relegated to a time where they're considered simple games. Right. All you do is fly around and shoot. Right. Like you can kind of boil down most games to a simple explanation in that respect. Right. It can be as far from the truth as possible. But also, like, there are these stigmas that have happened with shmups where, like anyone can sit down and play my game, beat it in an hour, and that's it. Right. That's all they have to do. And that's enough for some people. Right. Most vast majority of gamers, don't beat games, right? That's the other side of it too. Like they don't spend the time to really replay the game. So games that also have, that they're shorter but have a lot of replayability, they don't, and don't get me wrong, there are exceptions to this, right? Like look at Vampire Survivors. It's rekindled the idea, like one of their taglines is "Be the bullet hell," right? And they managed to create things I hadn't quite ever experienced, and it's been wildly successful, and it's really reached a more mainstream audience, right? Which is fantastic. But it's one thing to create games. It's another thing to, have games that people want to play, that will dedicate time to. And, like the modern gamer, we all have backlogs that'll last a lifetime, right? Like, I mean, I've been doing this exercise with my buds where we have a spreadsheet and we've gone through every era of consoles that we played on PC as well, and we're trying to just remember all the games that we've beaten because we're big into still beating games and being part of that, not just games we played but just actually beaten, right? And like I'm still working on my list. It's great, it's a fantastic exercise, but it's really freaking hard to be like, oh, like and so I think one of the things that I really wanted to do is especially coming from streaming, right? Like like as a hobby, being able to do the DrBossKey show and have the community and have the folks that just showed up and to really have this magical time. And we did the show for four and a half years. And then I got busy with making the game. And so I changed from kind of live streams to then doing on the YouTube channel, just doing devlogs and doing, because we only have so much time, right? Plus a day job. So
exactly.
And I found that it was really nice to transfer a lot of the skills because, well, essentially what I was building with the DrBossKey universe, right, is I was waiting for, I got started in 1999 at LucasArts. I was very humble and very lucky to join the game industry. I didn't think I was worthy, and I thought I'd show up and there would be all these people that were crazy, insane, hardcore about games, and everything's greener, on the other side of the fence until you actually arrive. So there was a lot of reality that kind of settled into that. But I've been in the game industry or software development, I mean, almost 25 years at this point. And I think you know, one of the things that kind of comes from being in that space for a long time, I joined the game industry because I dream and am passionate about games. I play games my entire life. Games are my go-to for recharging my batteries. I'm an introverted person, right? A lot of us are. And having alone time and having this magic like place where you can just be in a game, in the game world, immersed. I love online and co-op and multiplayer, all these other things too. But I love all types of games, right? And you know, as a game producer, there isn't anything I haven't made at this point in terms of games. I produced animation, engineering, art pipelines, right? VFX, like writing, localization, QA, you know, shipping. I've shipped on every platform, right? Like, and I was good enough that people were like, cool, stay with us. We want to keep you, right? But I was never great enough to where someone was like, hey, we want you to, we want you to direct, because ideally I want to direct and make my own games, right? But we want you to direct this animation, or we want you to do more than, and to be more on the creative side than just the production side. So I've always kind of done my production work, but I've always then been hungry to do all these other aspects. And so getting, at 47 years old at this point, right? Like about 5 years ago, I was like, okay, trying to convince companies that I have the stuff for this, I can't wait anymore. Like, I can put on my hat and do all this crazy hard work, and maybe I'll be recognized for it, but that's not enough, right? And even if you're successful, it's still not enough. And it's a very competitive space. So I took the opportunity of doing the Twitch show, creating my IP, creating the world, like creating the game environment, creating the universe, right? And then the Twitch show is Straczynski basically said this, and Straczynski was one of the main creators. He's the main creator for Babylon 5. Super talented folk, like a person, great writer, lots of wonderful things that he's done. But he basically described when he was working on Babylon 5, and it was nuts, right? Like, is a direct competitor to the Star Trek shows that were out at the time. And he said that when he would write an episode for the show, that it was like opening a window, putting his head into the universe, looking around and writing everything that he saw down, and then disconnecting and then working on that episode, right? And he had bigger plans and things like that too. But I always loved the way that he described that. And when I had this epiphany kind of thinking about that, where the Twitch show for me was basically this window into my life and my opportunity to say, I want to direct art. I want to make characters. I want to make games. I want to do all of these cool things. I have the force of will to do it. And I want to share that journey. It's a very long-winded way to get back to your question. But I want to share this journey with folks in community. And as the streamers, this as well. You're a steward of community. You are a leader and the person, your greatest fan. You're the person that puts forth the ideals and concepts that you want to put out into the world. And if you're lucky and if people are invested, and who knows, there's lots of reasons for it, people will join you on the journey. And so when I switched from Twitch to doing YouTube and doing the devlogs and doing because I needed the extra time just to be able to spend that, because I was streaming 4 times a week, and it was about 4.5, 5 hours a show. And then there's all the times and things that happen in between the shows, right? Like you're preparing for your next stuff, you're preparing your new overlays or whatever stuff you might be doing, right? The grind is tough, and especially if you're not full time. Right. And so I was able to take those things and the community and all the wonderful folks that have given me their time, and I was able to craft this game and have folks that never played a shmup. They kind of knew what they were. Everyone kind of does to some degree, but they were willing to give me their time and play. And so I have crafted a huge amount, like hundreds and hundreds of hours of this game. Is not just me, but me doing what I know from game development and game craft, doing the QA work, watching the video playtest, watching the video playback feedback, right? And the nice thing about Twitch and Twitch community is lots of streamers like yourself are very comfortable doing their experiences. And so as I've been watching your playthroughs, I take my notes and then I can better craft and tune the game. And so a Discord server for the game and being focused there and being able to share and find ways to engage and incentivize, encourage, people to be able to play the game, to get their one credit clear challenges, right? To become part of the process is very much my humble beginnings to say, these are things I care and I'm very passionate about. This is how I care about community. This is where I care about making content, being creative, and not being apologetic about creating things that, so what? Like, I'm never going to be a crazy commercial success based on this game, right? Like, I'm not going to build an indie game studio that can basically pay for itself and do whatever I want, but based on this project alone. But it's a starting point, and being able to include people along that journey has been huge. And just taking all the skills that we have, from everyone can be online these days. Anyone can do video. Everyone's got a platform. Everyone can do socials, right? So
I mean, you can basically take your phone and live stream if you wanted to.
Yep.
It's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think that it's been, the game has sold. We're sitting at about 275 copies. And I released the game in August. And the thing is, I could be like, 275 copies, no one's gonna read me. Like, you know what? Like, that's 275 people that have dedicated their time. I found some super fans, right? Like, anyone that's willing to sit down and do a one credit clear challenge and to give me 8 to 10 hours. And again, I have some fans that are like 60, 70 hours in the game. Like, I've had some friends that were also streamers, and they're like, I was getting a little bored with modern games, and then I saw you did your thing, and I wanted to support you, and they kind of played a little bit, and then they kept playing, and then they kept playing, and then they pushed a little further, and then they had the challenges, and then and all of a sudden, that's how they spent all this time, and they've told me that it's rekindled their passion for gaming in ways that they'd forgotten, and that's again to gameplay density matters, right? Like these games are hard. They're flow state games, because the moment you lose focus, you get punished, right? It is, but on the flip side, once you're dialed in and you're in there, even though you might have your highs and lows, you're making mistakes, the reality is time is just ripping away and it goes by super quick. And, it's one of those things where just one more playthrough, one more attempt, one more chance. I sit down and I play a Kai Katana and I'm about 30 hours into the game, 31 or 2, not counting some of the other R&D stuff. But, and I'm like, let me just one more try. Let's see if I can just, I got hit and I died. Let me just restart the level, right? Or let me restart the run. And there's something to be said for this old school style of gameplay mechanics and gameplay experiences that I think a lot of modern gamers are either it's not for them, because we live in a place now where casual gaming is ubiquitous. It's everywhere. Mobile gaming is everywhere,
huge, yeah.
right? Like, gaming is so multi-generational. It's not nearly looked down upon like it used to be. Like, back when I was growing up, it wasn't appropriate to play games if you were a little girl. That's what society was telling you, right? Like, not that I believe that, but it wasn't appropriate to play games, once you were going to high school, right? Like, it wasn't appropriate. Like stop being a kid, stop playing with toys and be an adult, right? Like, very much an old school generation of thinking that doesn't really exist the way it does these days. Now, there's still some stigma, right? But
Of course.
food for thought.
It was, it was like I was having a conversation with somebody a month ago, and because you brought up about how there's this stigma about being a girl and being a gamer, and it was like when I was in high school, and the first girl that I dated came up to me and said, hey, I heard you're into comic books. I'm into comic books too. My first thought wasn't, oh, let me mansplain this to you. It was like, oh, no, we have a same interest. All right, we're on the right foot right now,
Yep.
That's how it should be, and it's been beautiful, especially, and I'm sure you can relate as somebody was bullied I actually have told the story on stream before, but I don't say it. I was bullied for how much I loved Mortal Kombat. But so it's kind of cool to see how now we're in an era where it's like Mortal Kombat's the cool thing. Like you're kind of like, you're the kid getting bullied if you don't like Mortal Kombat nowadays, So it's just weird to see how gaming has grown. And like you said, a lot of the modern gamings they very much are casual. Like there's a lot of people who play Fortnite who
Candy Crush.
Candy
Crush
world.
Which the match puzzle game, it has been around forever.
Yes, it has.
And now it's reached a polar level, right?
Yeah. So you're looking at something where it's, it's become more casual. And for me, it's, I'm always going to have that. I grew up in a competitive household because of what my dad did. He was a basketball coach, and I get a lot of my criticism from him because he like, they lose a game by like, I don't know, 3 points. And I'd be like, Dad, it's okay. The team played on. Nope, I'm a dumbass. I'm the worst coach ever. Nope, just need to give up. Nope, your dad's a failure, son. Stuff like that. So
Competition's a beautiful thing. It's hard.
It is. But that was the thing, and we've stressed this a lot, and it's a great selling point. I'm glad other people have seen it. That the main thing is this is a throwback, and a very good modern throwback. And the main thing about it too, in addition to being that, above all, and this as being in the industry for 25 years, it has to be fun to play. And if it's not fun to play, it's going to feel like a chore. And I think above all else, the big positive that I took away from this was that it was super fun to play. And that's why when I would always come back to it, even when I wasn't streaming it, I'd come back. I was like, let me do a level or two, just to play. And I think that's something that really needs to be, I think that should be like the main focus. I mean, I hope it's the main focus of all these game developers. You never know. Sometimes some of them are like, well, I got this art and I want to tell the story, but it's like, if your game gets mundane, people aren't going to finish the story. If people love playing the game, they're going to keep coming back. And that's what gets the replays, And I think you did a very tremendous job of that.
It's definitely, it's got quirky systems. It's got things in a shmup that I have never fully experienced. Again, like the weapon system. Like I played lots of shmups, lots of different weapons, and there are weapons I've never played with that are in this game, right? And things like pacifist mode. Never seen that in a shmup before. I've seen the concept of like, play through and not, play through level and not get it, hit like that. There's stuff like that for sure, but never integrate it in this way. Like, it's like my Devil May Cry rank system inspiration, right? Like, it's not, it's in some ways it's got some Euro shmup like sensibilities. It's got things that are like, hey, this isn't Eastern Japanese shmup sensibilities where everything is distilled down, boiled down into the core basics, and there's a lot of fun, a lot of amazing things that can be done in that space, but it like wasn't exactly what I want to build. And I because of the tool set and the community, because it's one of the things I do is I'm kind of an unofficial ambassador for Shmup Creator. I make content and tutorials. I just put up a video about how I made my intro cutscene in the tool set, the inevitably, right? Like I just did a play test for an early bullet hell game, vertical bullet hell shooter for the community, and this game is hard. Like it is unapologetically punch you in the face over and over and over, crazy hard, right? It is turned it up to 11 and then we'll go to 13, right? Like and I am not the best player ever, but I also, one of the things is I love to say this, right, which is it's not hard to make a hard game, right? Like I've already spent more time with my game than anyone else on the planet ever will. And if I can't create something ultra crazy hard after spending 2,000, 3,000 hours on something, I'm probably doing something wrong, right? But the problem is making something like that only appeals to a very small amount of people. There will be people that are very, very good at games and they love having the challenge. Like one of the things in shmups that's very interesting, right, is it's like the arms race in that in the olden days, the developer made the shmup. They went to the arcade, right? And then people played them and some of them were successful, some of them weren't, blah, blah, blah. And especially as we made that transition to also making console versions of shmups, they changed a little bit, but there were similarities in DNA. And players got better at playing shmups. Developers then had to make harder shmups to keep players that are engaged, and became this arms race, right? Like, and so we are sitting on the backs of, since the early 80s, very late 70s, but early 80s, of developers and players in this this relationship where they keep pushing. And that's how in the mid 90s, we had some of the birth of the subgenre of bullet hell, right? Like, and that then starts to alienate more and more players because bullet hell is a certain flavor of hard, like it, like to the point where people see it and they go, holy shit, nope, not even, right? And so here we are all these years later, and like a long time ago, there were it's like no, not super long time ago, but Super Mario Maker, right? So there's this whole ecosystem of before there was Super Mario Maker, people would make they were dubbed the asshole Mario games. So they were like ROM hacks back in the day, and they'd make new levels, and they would make them critical, ultra precise timing with a bunch of wacky creative stuff. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. That's super, super cool, right? And that someone wants to sit down to do that. Someone wants to be able to play it and engage with it to get the absolute critical timing to beat that level, right? But the salient point here, right, is that isn't necessarily fun for everyone. And if you don't work on making a game that is fun first, to your point, and engaging and helps people on the journey to develop their skills and to improve, because I'll guarantee you, there are plenty of people that have played my game. The game's still too hard for them, like at some point, because I've been able to play test and, I've had streamers that play the game and my streamer friends, like where the distraction is there, I've been able to improve and craft the game to make it more accessible. But on the flip side of that too, it's much harder to make games that are balanced, that evolve over time, that challenge your skills, that build up on skills, as opposed to making a game that is just unapologetically brute force hard, right? And if you take a look at this, like, it's funny because Souls-like is a verb now for game culture, right?
Exactly.
Like everything that's hard is Souls-like now, right?
Or roguelite or whatever, yeah.
But with roguelike, you have some but there were random elements before there were roguelikes in that respect too, right? So, yeah. But one of the things in a Souls-like game that's really interesting is that they slowed down combat. They made it to where they had good telegraphing for the most part, and they made it extra dangerous. And as you level up, and a combination of leveling up and then also learning how to fight these enemies that are crazy dangerous, everything can one-shot you when you're brand new in the game, right? Like the sense of accomplishment for struggling against the game in a combination of building up your skills and improving those skills, plus, the mechanism of how you level up and the strategy and all that good stuff, right? Creates this magic space. I played all the Souls games, beaten all the Souls games, right? Sekiro, all the games. And that creates this place where players enjoy the growth of the challenge. But I'll tell you this, in a Souls game, I use this, like, one of the things they do that's really, really smart is there's very, very rarely is there just cheap shit, right? Like for instance, you climb to the top of the ladder. Well, if you climb to the top of the ladder and the enemy kicks you in the face to your death immediately, and the answer to that was you should have looked up there and killed the enemy before you climbed the ladder, that sucks. Like people,
right.
So you can be hard, you can be challenging, and a lot of modern developers, unfortunately, are kind of missing the mark when they're making their Souls-like games, right? Like, but if you don't make it fair and balanced in a way where you feel like every death is something that you could have prevented, then you don't have a game that is engaging. A game is less fun because, well, you've developed it with such a narrow focus of difficulty, because as you as the developer and designer, you're going to know this thing in a way that no one will ever know it. And maybe some people will pull it apart and get to that point, but it's such a small and focused place that really cheapens, I think, a lot of core game design, a lot of modern games as well.
And you're so right, because there are a lot of these games that come out and they're very, they're hard for the sake of being hard. And I think once you've done that, I think that becomes an issue when, I mean, obviously we made fun of me complaining about some stuff here in the game, but there's stuff here where it's like I guess what I'm trying to say is I never felt overwhelmed by, like, truly, not, and by overwhelm I mean I never felt like I couldn't have prevented something happening to me, especially when I would go back and watch. Like in the moment, of course, I mean, as a gamer, in the moment, you're going to get mad and be like, what the fuck? But when you go back and actually watch, and you're like, okay, yeah, I could have prevented that had I mean, it's the same thing with fighting games, watching your replays and being like, I could have prevented that. Okay, if I just, waited for that thing to do that, and I think that's, I've played a lot of this game at this point. I've watched a lot of this game at this point, both my own playthroughs and other playthroughs, to kind of get ideas for what to do. And I every playthrough I watch, I feel like you have hit that mark exceptionally well. I feel like there's, I feel like you did it very, very well, and better than a lot, like you said, a lot of modern games. And I just feel like there's a lot to build off of, which leads to my next question: what can we expect in an Interstellar 2?
Well, so Interstellar 2 is in development. So it's going to be this time around. It's going to be it's going to take place. It's all about basically this other boss monster that we created a long time ago. His name's Gressel. Gressel comes from this corporation called Paltech, and it's PAL. And basically, Gressel, again, coming back to like the stories, right? It's like those are the kind of the seeds of why I want to create, right? So Gressel basically from Paltech, what they do is they explore, because the world in the DrBossKey universe, there's sci-fi and there's fantasy. It's kind of mixed together. So the corporation investigates lycanthropy, werewolves, right? So what they wind up doing is they create a super soldier line using the regenerative properties of lycanthropy. And so they have this line of mercenaries, because Paltech is it's like a mercenary world, and they provide tools and technology for other species and worlds to wage war with, right? So what happens is that Gressel goes out on all these mercenary campaigns, and he basically kind of gets destroyed in many different ways. Like they're these super soldiers, because they have such crazy regenerative properties. They can blow off their limbs, like they can take insane amounts of battle damage, and as long as pretty much their brain and heart continue to function, like then they scoop them up off the battlefield, because they found that instead of creating new super soldiers, it was better just to continue to repair them, and they would also grow and evolve from their skills. So hence the reason why it's power corrupts is kind of one of the core themes of the DrBossKey universe. And in this particular case, anytime a world becomes out of balance, where either light or dark are basically the dominant force, as opposed to trying to have kind of a yin yang balance to that, DrBossKey winds up getting summoned to deal with these anomalies, right? So in Interstellar 2, it's all about Gressel. It's all very cyberpunk, cybercorpo, which has been a lot of fun. I actually started making some of this stuff while we were doing Interstellar 1. And this time around, I want to make the game, the runs will be about 30 minutes or so, about half the time. It's half the time to play through. They'll still be horizontal, and then I'm really amping up the amount of connection between the environment and the enemies. So in a lot of like shmups, especially in top-down shooters or vertical shooters, they do a great job spawning enemy tank lines, and there's things on the ground and things in the air, and like just being able to blow things up and feel how that connects you to the world is a big aspect of how we're going to do the development for Interstellar 2. I'm still working on some prototype stuff there. I'm going to take the weapon system, because I don't want to just make Interstellar 2 and make it be essentially Interstellar 1 with more. So I want to take, and this time you're still going to have a rapid shot. You're going to have a power shot. The power shot is going to be this astral projection melee sword slashing kind of thing. So that'll be super cool. And then you have your rapid shot, and you're still going to have an auto shot ability, but the weapon system will be a little less unhinged. If I want to make another crazy unhinged weapon system, which I do, that'll be Interstellar Sentinel 3, maybe. We'll see what that looks like. So, but I want to kind of like homogenize it down into a little bit more of a focus, a little less craziness in that respect. And then I want to lean a little bit more into some of the bullet hell elements. And then there's a few other aspects. So I want to create more, like the levels will be about the same length, but I'm going to be a little bit more rigid in every level will have a sub boss, and sub bosses will time out, and like there'll be new mechanisms there. I'm still using a lot of the scoring systems and other mechanisms. We'll still have the equivalent of a monster trophy system for the dynamic difficulty and layering. So, but it's still, right now I'm working on a lot of the bullets, because while I enjoy the aesthetics of Interstellar 1, I feel like I could do a lot better, especially with enemy bullets. So, and enemy bullet patterns and designs. So I think that's an area that I'm actively doing development on right now. We're putting up dev videos to show the stuff in progress. And then I'm going to take so I've been playing a lot of Akai Katana Shin. Again, fantastic game. Definitely worth playing it. And that's sort of my North Star for inspiration. So we're going to take some, basically it's called Denmaku. It's a style of a bullet hell shooter. And one of the things that they do is you have a button that when you hold it down, it puts you into focus mode, which basically slows down your character, your player. But also, it often takes, you'll have like a wide spread beam, and then when you use the focus mode button, it turns into a narrow focus beam, but also slows you down so you can micro in between the bullets and things like that. So it's a different way of playing, but it also feels pretty good because then it allows you to be faster for your macro dodging. So that feels really good in a way, but then you can slow down and then have the microing. So and being able to switch back and forth are going to be a core piece of the game. I might be a nerd.
Hey, you're talking to a nerd, all right? We have to stick together.
Absolutely. Yeah, so Interstellar 2 will be it's primarily going to be so no fantasy. It'll have some minor fantasy bits. I mean, obviously the main boss dude he's got werewolf, DNA type of thing, but it's very very much high sci-fi, cyberpunk. Lots of mechs. There's going to be a lot of mechanized ships, so it'll be less on and not really monster side, not a lot of monster forms. It'll be more on the like you're dealing with mechs in a mechanized city, and it's a mega city, very inspired from like kind of the Judge Dredd kind of series. And I really want to we want to tell a more environmentally cohesive story that serves gameplay by connecting it more deeply to the environment. So I think that there's going to be some really cool stuff in there. Main thing is getting to we're going to do an early access once we get level 1 really dialed and kind of polished, and then we'll continue to do our releases from there and kind of work through it. But yeah, lots of stuff going on in that space.
Well, I look forward to screaming and cursing at some of the bosses in that game. I look forward to receiving my 1cc for it like I did for this. The game is Interstellar Sentinel. You can purchase it on Steam. Highly worth your time. And I will say this. I know, me and BossKey have known each other for a while. I've been in the journalism game for a little bit. I've watched some friends' movies, and I've had to give them the bad news, and I would not have this much praise for the Mr. Doctor's game if I didn't enjoy it as much as I do. And I want to thank him for joining us today and having a discussion. Can you tell the folks where they can find your wonderful developer logs and your other stuff?
Yeah, sure. It's super simple. DrBossKey, DrBossKey. You just type that into the internet and you'll find all the stuff. So the game is Interstellar Sentinel. We have all of the top SEO for Google search, so not hard to find. I do all of the devlogs on the DrBossKey YouTube channel. And it's kind of a mixture you can see over time. Like this is where I was doing my Twitch stuff and doing my live stuff and just all the wacky stuff that we do as content creators. So you can follow the developments over there. There's on Discord from the Steam page that I'm putting all my devlogs for Interstellar 2. It's all going to be the same Discord server, so that we do updates there as well. So easy stuff to find. If you want to be involved, if you want to do early access, if you want to do play testing, I'm only just a Discord message away. And even for the folks that are super interested in like game development and the game development process, but maybe can't afford it. Again, I'm only just a DM away. So and it's been wonderful to work on the Shmup Creator tools and to facilitate community and to really big shout outs to Sunny 2000 and the folks over there. I couldn't have had these dreams and big imagination without being able to lean into the journey that they all started for all of us, and it's been really cool to be part of that. So thank you everybody.
And thank you again for being here again. The game is Interstellar Sentinel. You can purchase it on Steam. Highly recommended. I'm Filler Instinct. You can find me on Twitch, Kick, YouTube, all that fun stuff. I'm normally playing Tekken. You're going to see more Interstellar content coming soon. And I will link below to everything that the Mr. Doctor has said. Thank you again for your time, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Thanks, everybody.